In 1976, multiple residents in Circleville, Ohio started to receive bizarre and spine-chilling letters in their mail, detailing personal information and intimate truths about their lives. The dark secrets contained within the letters were capable of ruining people's lives, including their jobs, marriages, and much worse. It is believed that over 1,000 letters were sent. So who were they from, how long were they sent for, and why? Let's find out, and please kindly subscribe, thank you. A school bus driver named Mary Gillespie was accused of having an extramarital affair with the local school's superintendent. Mary received a letter advising that somebody had been watching her house and was aware that she had children. The letter was postmarked Columbus, Ohio, and did not have a return address. Mary decided to ignore the letter, and little over a week later, she received a follow-up in the post. Mary decided to hide the letters from everybody, until shortly after, Mary's husband Ron became a recipient of the anonymous writer. The letters were written in tall block capitals, and the letter to Ron was rather threatening, saying that if he did not prevent his wife's affair, he would be placing his life in grave danger. Ron is believed to have been unaware of his wife's affair, and presumed the letter to be a prank. A fortnight later, the creepy author threatened to release details publicly about the affair allegations, including having it aired on television sets, citizen band radios, and even advertisement boards. Things were just starting to turn more sinister. Mary and Ron had only told 3 people about the bizarre letters, being Ron's sister, her husband Paul Freshour, and Paul's sibling. With thinking caps on, Mary had a possible suspect in mind that could have been writing the nasty letters, so Paul started to write letters to the suspect, claiming he knew who he or she was, in a bid to contain the situation. For a while, their plan had worked, and no further letters were received for several weeks. But this was far from over, and the plot becomes even more unsettling. In August 1977, Ron received a chilling phone call from a person alleging to be the writer of the letters, and Ron was satisfied the caller was the writer. Ron picked up his gun and proceeded to his white and red pickup truck, despite the writer having claimed to have been watching Ron's truck. Within minutes, Ron was found the mirror opposite of alive inside his truck, that was crashed into a tree. The police determined that Ron had fired 1 or more shots from his gun before the truck came into contact with the tree. Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe ruled Ron's death as a tragic accident, alleging Ron had lost control of his pickup truck and crashed under the influence of alcohol, and therefore foul play, leading residents to believe that Sheriff Radcliffe could have been involved in a cover-up. Ron's blood alcohol level, however, was .16, meaning he was twice the legal limit to drive. Ron's family were concerned by this, as he didn't drink that much, unless of course he had something on his mind that led him to guzzle a few more than usual. Eventually, Mary confessed that her and the superintendent were in a relationship, albeit they claimed that this relationship did not start until long after the letters had stopped being received. Some years had now passed, and Mary was getting on with her life, until February 1983, when her harassment reignited. Mary continued driving her bus along the usual route, when it became apparent that the letter writer had began posting threatening signs next to the road. The anonymous writer had increased their game. On one occasion, Mary had finally had enough, and decided to exit the bus, and proceed to take down the latest sign she had spotted. This is where things take even more of a drastic turn. As Mary was about to rip down the sign, she found it booby-trapped. The sign was attached to a piece of string that was also attached to a box containing a small loaded pistol on the other end. If Mary had not have noticed this, and pulled down the sign as intended, the gun would have fired, and Mary may very well have been killed. Scared for her life, Mary alerted the authorities, who discovered that the serial number had been partially filed off the pistol, so with a little detective work and a lab test to raise the serial number on the gun, they could locate the owner of the weapon. And that they did. In a further twist, the gun was found to be registered to Paul Freshour, the man that had recently separated from Ron's sister. Despite this new evidence, Paul was adamant that his gun had been stolen from him, and hadn't had time to report it missing yet. What do you think? Are we getting any closer to the truth yet? Well, you may be surprised. A little later into February 1983, Sheriff Radcliffe requested a meeting with Paul to undertake a tactical handwriting test. The sheriff made Paul attempt to copy the handwriting from the toxic letters that had been sent. Once the test had been completed, Paul showed Sheriff Radcliffe whereabouts he kept his gun in his garage, and then they both returned to the courthouse. Paul was then formally arrested and charged with attempted murder. In October 1983, Paul went to trial for the attempted murder of Mary Gillespie, but was never charged for writing the menacing letters, even though they would also be an important part of the evidence against him. Paul was subsequently determined as being the writer of the letters by a handwriting expert. Mary also believed the expert. In addition to this, Paul's boss verified that he was not at work on the day the box and pistol were located, and although Paul had a valid alibi for most of the day, he didn't take the stand in his defense. Paul was adamant he was innocent. Nevertheless, he was convicted and sent to prison for a sentence of 7 to 24 years. So is this case closed? Far from it. Yet another twist is to come. Whilst Paul was in prison, he began receiving letters from the anonymous writer, who claimed they were determined to keep Paul behind bars. Other residents continued to receive letters too, all still postmarked from Columbus, even though Paul was in a prison over 100 miles away in Lima, and simply could not be sending them given the limitations and restrictions of his prison life. Paul was then placed in solitary confinement, yet still the letters kept coming. So had Paul really been framed? Years passed, and in December 1990, Paul was finally eligible for a parole hearing, which was denied due to the letters, despite there being no way he could have been sending them, and stumping prison staff who described Paul as a model prisoner. Even more years passed, and in May 1994, potentially innocent Paul was finally paroled, and continued to maintain his innocence, despite paying for this with his life inside. The author of the letters has still never been revealed. A journalist by the name of Martin Yant was keen to get to the bottom of the Circleville letters, and sourced another possible suspect that could have been the writer. He also discovered that almost half an hour before Mary found the gun in the box, another bus driver on Mary's route had seen a suspicious man standing next to a yellow El Camino. Mary claimed that one of the other bus drivers had a thing for her, but had always rejected him, so could this disgruntled man be the letter writer? The man Yant informs us of was at the same spot where the trap would be found by Mary, and Yant also found that the possible suspect's brother was the owner of the same type of car. He goes on to say that the description does not match Paul, and as previously referenced, he did have a solid alibi at the time. In 1994, a TV show named Unsolved Mysteries visited Circleville to make a documentary on the incident. During the filming, the crew received a postcard which read, "Forget Circleville, Ohio. Do nothing to hurt Sheriff Radcliffe. If you come to Ohio, UL sickos will pay." The Circleville writer. The letter was written in the same style as the previous letters, but assumed to be a prank, and discounted. However, Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe and Mary Gillespie, key characters in this tale, declined to be interviewed for the story. Paul Freshour, the man who served time for this case, wrote a blog for several years until he passed away in 2012. The case is not officially being investigated, yet unofficially, many still seek answers to the truth behind this mystery, and suggest at least 3 letter writers were involved in the case, none of whom were Paul. These 3 people are believed to be the son of the superintendent, whom Mary had an affair with, the fellow bus driver that was infatuated with Mary, and Paul's ex-wife, being Ron Gillespie's sister. All I know is that if I received a letter like that, I'd pack my suitcases and run like a newborn deer on ice to the most faraway place I could find. Please subscribe, and thanks for watching.